First, after a week-long wait that began with the massive FBI operation at Mar-a-Lago, we are finally getting a look at the search warrant used in the raid. That includes a look at the charges former President Trump may be facing. We now know the Justice Department is investigating Trump under the Espionage Act, which has a lot more to do with records than it actually does spying. It also appears the FBI waited for nearly 3 days from the time the Florida judge, Bruce Reinhart, signed the warrant to the morning agents actually raided the president's private residence. If these records are so secret and so important, why did it take so long? 2 property lists accompanying the warrant show more than 20 boxes of evidence containing 11 sets of classified documents were seized by agents, including some documents marked with the highest security classification the government can apply, TS-SCI documents, top secret, sensitive compartmented information. The warrant also specifies the criminal statutes the agents were pursuing evidence under, Section 793, 2071, and 1519 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code. Gathering or transmitting or losing defense information under the Espionage Act, concealment, removal, or mutilation of government records, and destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations, all of which fall under, that last one, under obstruction of justice laws. As expected, the itemized property lists were, for the most part, vague. Some of them, however, were listed as various classified documents. This one was kind of specific. Executive grant of clemency re Roger Jason Stone Jr., info re President of France, leather-bound box of documents, potential presidential record, binder of photos, handwritten note, miscellaneous secret documents. Nowhere did the warrant specifically list classified nuclear documents, as the Washington Post reported were taken during the raid. Though if the Post reporting is accurate, those would likely be among the top secret or TS-SCI documents themselves. Trump himself had called for the release of the warrant after Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the DOJ would move to unseal it. In a fiery statement on Truth Social, Trump responded. Number one, it was all declassified. Number two, they didn't have to seize anything. They could have had it any time they wanted without playing politics and breaking into Mar-a-Lago. It was in secured storage with an additional lock put on per their request. They could have had it any time they wanted, and that includes long ago. All they had to do was ask. I spoke with Trump attorney Christina Bobb last night, who told me his legal team was surprised by the FBI raid because they had, up until that point, been cooperating with law enforcement. Bobb told me Trump handed over everything investigators had asked for prior to the search. She argued that the president used his authority to declassify the material before he left office. It seems that this is the legal defense the president team is taking. We'll have a little more on that specific defense of what he declassified later in the show. Now, release of the warrant and property list follow an extraordinary week in our country, with the FBI search on former President Trump's Florida home on Monday and the political fallout that has followed. Depending on which side of the cable news spectrum you listen to, the release of the warrant either proves Trump is so crooked he risked our national secrets, or that the new information proves nothing except that he continues to be the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt.
What you are looking at right now is literally the receipts. You ever hear people say, well, we got receipts?
It completely validates the search warrant. It completely validates the government's investigation.
So it ain't no hoax. It's there. And there's no reasonable argument that could be advanced for why that material is at Mar-a-Lago.
Number one, I don't see any smoking gun. I don't see any urgency.
This is just about documents. It's extraordinarily dangerous. The president is just absolutely outrageous. It can't be about just the documents. If it is, then the Department of Justice is even more broken than I think it probably is.
Merrick Garland wants to burn the republic down, infuriate probably 100 million plus Americans over leather-bound boxes of documents. What is this, Anchorman?
All right. If it turns out a former president was holding on to some of the nation's most important secrets, well, that could be a very big problem. You might remember President Trump had a lot to say when Hillary Clinton had her own email server with classified information on it. But let's be clear. It could also come that the FBI did, in fact, make a series of missteps in how they handled this whole situation. And there are reasons why some on the right do not trust the FBI. Again, President Trump's attorney.
To the extent that, there's a lot of emotions stirred, I would actually blame the FBI themselves. I mean, it's not an isolated incident. This is not Trump saying, oh, the FBI is bad, you know, go hate the FBI. The FBI lied to the FISA court. They lied about Crossfire Hurricane. They lied about Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yeah,
they've lied about unmasking. Like, they've lied across the board. So this is a series of things. So I don't believe we can blame this one incident.
No, all true points and ones we brought up the past couple of days. All right, we bring in Michael J. Moore and Danya Perry, both federal prosecutors. Appreciate you both being here. Danya, is there something we're missing out of this that all of a sudden says that there was this grave threat to national security that we now know about?
I think there's clearly a lot that we don't know. It's not a big nothing. It may not be, you know, the national security nightmare that, you know, the other side is positing. It's something. There were documents there. There's, I think, a big question about whether A, they were in fact declassified. B, whether you can just, any president can just issue a blanket declassification by waving a wand and it becomes magically so. But regardless, what does seem clear from the search warrant receipt is that there were documents there that are at a minimum appear to be official documents. So whether there's a violation of the Espionage Act is one question that we will see play out. But another is on a much more, you know, benign, perhaps mundane level, were there official White House documents that should not have been there, that should have been sent to the National Archives? So there's certainly a range of possibilities here, and neither side knows. We just don't know.
No. There's so much we don't know. But Michael, I think about this situation. There is prosecutorial discretion, and you think about how Merrick Garland, in his 3-minute statement that was 2 minutes of him telling us what he couldn't tell us, talked about how he made this decision personally, and everyone has agreed there is a gravity to going to raid with a search warrant a former president's office. Yet if we were to believe these documents have such grievous national security issues, they'd been there for a while, a long while. Not only have they been there for a long while, but allegedly President Trump and the FBI and his attorneys met at Mar-a-Lago back in June. It was 3 days that they waited between they went and got the warrant to when they executed the warrant. And you put all that together, how does this come up to America's nuclear codes and our most sensitive secrets were there?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you both. I really think that we've spent the last few days, watching the cart get ahead of the horse here, and we all ought to just kind of take a step back and slow down. We don't really know much from this receipt and from this warrant. The warrant is just the legal document that basically says where they can search and when they can search. And it has some code sections that talk about documents, and they don't say the Espionage Act, but that's something that a lot of people have latched onto. And it really deals more with whether or not there were documents that could affect national defense and whether or not those were retained, as opposed to, like you say, that we're not talking about James Bond folks crawling around Russia's spine or anything right now. So I think we need to take a step back. We don't know much from the return, but that's not unexpected. Remember here, the search warrant receipt, if these are classified documents, they're not going to spell them out in the public eye about what they are, whether or not they're nuclear documents, whether or not they're secrets about, some world leader. They're going to talk in vague terms about it. And so I'm not surprised at all with that. Yeah. We don't have the search warrant affidavit, but we just don't know much right now. So I think we really need to know what the documents were. Were they declassified in some way?
But then, Michael, we wouldn't have anything to talk about on cable news for hours upon hours upon days upon days upon hours upon hours. If we had to wait, come on.
That's the reason. That's the reason that we don't talk. That the department and prosecutors don't talk about their investigations going on, because you don't know, and there's always another side of the coin. There's always another page of the book that we can't talk about. So we don't know now.
Yeah,
And
well,
again,
that's a great point.
correct.
But, Danya, I keep coming back to this concept that if we are to believe that Merrick Garland made this decision after thought, contemplation, and with great deference to the significance of raiding a former president's house, wouldn't there be something in either of these documents that we saw that would be like, aha, there's the smoking gun? And couldn't they have intentionally put something in these documents that would have let everybody go, okay, this was worth it?
No, the short answer is no. These are forms. It really is a fill in the blank form that the search warrant itself and the inventory is what it is, and it was not ever going to be more detailed. It typically is not, and here particularly when what they are listing are classified documents, it's not going to be any more detailed than that. Where you would see the detail is the supporting affidavit that was sworn to by the federal agent who went before the federal magistrate judge to get the search warrant. And that's where you've got the detail of the chain of events, the evidence supporting probable cause here, both to believe that there were fruits or instrumentalities or evidence of crimes, and
the search warrant affidavit is the big thing, and so far, at least Team Trump, if you were to believe them, has said that they don't have it. Michael Moore, Danya Perry, thank you both. Appreciate it, especially on a Friday night. It's good to see you.
You too.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.